Gil here with Sailing Vessel Dream Chaser, and in this week's episode we're going to talk a little bit about when you have unexpected repairs or issues you have to take care of. So this week I was actually doing work in Indianapolis, Indiana. I was there Monday through Friday, got home mid-afternoon today, Friday, and when I got home my wife says, hey, by the way, the electroscan doesn't seem to be treating the waste properly. So on Dream Chaser we have what's called an electroscan waste treatment system. Essentially what happens is the waste from the head gets put into a stored holding tank, and then with each treatment cycle that holding tank puts the waste, whatever that happens to be, liquid, solids, etc., into a chamber that it gets macerated, and it gets charged with salt water and high amperage. That does a treatment, and then the next time you actually flush it treats that same waste and liquid again, and then ultimately it discharges it overboard through a through hull. It's as gross as that sounds to some people who maybe aren't boaters. It actually treats it as well as, if not better than, the local sewer plant in your municipality. As a matter of fact, the company actually makes commercial units for cities. I know the city of Pasadena, for example, has an electroscan commercial size unit in their facility. So I thought it would be a good idea to talk a little bit about troubleshooting and how to go about troubleshooting, and frankly the value of that skill. So when Deb let me know this wasn't working, the first thing I ultimately do is always test it myself. And it's not that you don't believe the person doing it, but you really want to focus on every little thing about that. You want to hear the noises it makes, you want to ensure the timing of sounds are consistent to what you would expect. And it really is amazing when you live on a boat or you're very observant of any system that you're responsible for maintaining. You really get to the point where you hear every sound. I have been able to detect the bearings going bad in a bilge pump just by the sound of it coming on and off, because you get used to hearing it and you know what it should and shouldn't sound like. So the skills around troubleshooting really come down to a couple of items. The first one is knowing how the systems operate from an educational perspective. Two, understanding sort of the flow. In computers you might refer to this as the flow of data. In plumbing you would refer to it as the flow of liquids. In electricity it's the flow from the power source all the way to the unit and back. But you have to understand the flow of all of the components of whatever system this is. And in the case of a waste treatment system, not exactly the most beautiful flow items you want to consider. So we have a 12-volt electroscan system. It's called the hold and treat solution. It's actually an electroscan waste treatment facility combined with a holding tank. I think it's an 11-gallon holding tank. It's actually fairly small because it treats it as well. But the first thing we did when we bought the boat is I went out to the manufacturer's website, Raritan, and I downloaded every document they had on it, from the sales brochures to the installation manual to the troubleshooting guide to the parts guide, etc. So you download all of them and read them start to finish. It's a good idea to help understand how these things operate. So the brief description I gave earlier around what actually occurs in the system, it's really handy to know that. If you were to find a leak, for example, you would know where to start looking and sort of isolate it from the head all the way through all the components, from the tank to the macerating pump, to the actual treatment center, treatment facility itself, all the way to the discharge side. So knowing that flow helps you isolate where those problems are. It's the same with anything that's electrical or plumbing. So upon this notice from Deb that it wasn't working, I went and I tested the unit, and sure enough, what typically happens, and we just know this from running it very often, when you flush the toilet, depending on whether you have it connected to the head to automatically treat or you treat it with a separate cycle. We actually treat ours with a separate cycle. So when we hit the treatment button, what we actually hear are several motors that kick on. The macerator kicks on in the electroscan treatments unit itself. The mixer kicks on in the electroscan unit itself. The electrodes kick on but don't make any noise. And then the last thing that kicks on is the pump that actually pumps a set amount of liquid to be treated from the holding tank into the first chamber of the treatment facility. So it is a diaphragm waste pump, and it runs for about 8 or 10 seconds. It's just long enough to pump that amount into the unit. So when I ran this unit, as soon as I pressed the start button, it ran for a half a second and stopped, instantly stopped. And when it stopped, the display went blank on the control unit that sits in the bathroom that kind of gives you its status, right? It's an amperage and voltages, etc. So knowing that, we realized, okay, we have something that's a hard stop. As soon as I hear something hard stop like that, the first thing you want to do is make sure there's not a mechanical block. So, thinking about this, we want to know, is there a chance that something is in the unit and wrapped around, for example, one of the motor shafts, and it's preventing it from turning and ultimately overloading the circuit and turn it off. So the next step was really to start isolating items. In our particular unit, Deb and I we're in fresh water right now, and these units actually require salt water. So when you're at sea, it's not really an issue. When you're in a freshwater body of water, or you have it freshwater plumbed like we do, you have to actually add salt to the system. For those that know something about electricity, you know that water is a good conductor, but salt water is a significantly better conductor. And given that this electrodes actually pump voltage and amperage into the water itself, into that salt water, it's important that it's salt water. So we have to add salt water to it. And we have noticed over the last month and a half or so, our amps that on the display, as it actually charges those electrodes and treats the waste, they have been dropping from the 19 and 20 amp range down into the 17 or 18 range, and every once in a while even dropping below 17 into the 14.5 to 15. Now at that amperage, it's still sufficient to treat the waste, but it's starting to get on the low side. I think below 14 the unit will actually shut off, and you have to reset it. And this typically happens when either the electrodes are going, they're starting to wear out, or you actually need to clean the unit. So you do have to clean it a couple of times a year. It's kind of a muriatic acid flush, and you soak those electrodes in muriatic acid, and that's what ultimately cleans them up. So knowing that we were having this issue, the first thing we thought was, okay, maybe the electrodes are caked up and that's an issue. So in order to troubleshoot it, the easiest thing to do is disconnect the wire that goes to the electrodes and try and run the unit and see if it shuts down again. Now, I want to make sure everybody understands. I do understand that if the electrodes are not connected, it's not treating. We don't intend to run it like that, but this is a troubleshooting exercise, and it's important to know what's broke. So we disconnected the electrodes, ran the unit again, and it instantly stopped again. So it told us it was not necessarily the electrodes, or at least the electrodes weren't the only thing causing the issue. Upon further inspection, on the top of the electroscan unit, you have where the actual macerator motor mounts on the top of the unit, and the mixer goes down below. Same with the mixing side and the crossover valve. We noticed that in the mixer motor, there was actually some corrosion around where the motor mounts to the top of the unit, making me think maybe there's something going on with that motor. So I went ahead and disconnected the positive lead off of that motor, and we tried the treatment again. This time it actually ran. So obviously it's not treating waste, but all the motors ran. It ran through its cycle and then errored out when the electrodes were not connected. So the good news is, by isolating this and troubleshooting it one step at a time, based on kind of a logical understanding of how the solution works, we were able to identify where the problem actually lies. So now that we knew where the problem was, it was time to actually take care of the solution. So first thing we did was connected back the electrodes and made sure that it continued to work, and it did. So we definitely isolated it down to the mixer motor. We went ahead and pumped out the holding tank so that we have an empty tank, and we're going to take a first step here where we're going to try and clean the unit really well just to see if we have any luck with this working. We're also going to take that mixer motor off the shaft, and I'm hoping to do it this way so I don't actually have to take the unit apart. As you can imagine, taking apart a waste treatment unit is not the most joyful time in your life. So we're going to start with the motor head itself and see if it's just the motor head that's bad, and we don't have to maybe get inside of the tank or inside the unit. For those that aren't familiar with these, they're about the size of a car battery, so it's not a very large unit. And when I say get in it, I don't mean literally climb in, I just mean, take it apart. Hey, how are you? Good, good. So we're hoping to just test the motor itself instead of actually doing the, hey, what? I missed you all out of town.
Missed you.
I can move. How was school?
Good.
Yeah? Do not forward your statements included. There's nothing you can get in the mail. Nobody's mailed you like a bucket full of money, ever.
Yeah!
What's up with that?
Don't know.
Yeah, turn sideways.
Yeah, I understand why.
Yeah, you can't stand on this, and by the way, be careful if you push that way, you'll break it. So when I rest my leg, it's just resting it. No, it's all right. Fish just jumped. You see it?
No.
Well, you saw the splash though, right?
Yeah.
Me too. All right, so we were able to isolate this down to just the motor, and we're hoping to just repair the motor itself, so we actually don't have to take apart the unit. Just a lot more work. And
Hey!
Yeah, another fish jump.
I saw that one.
In the springtime, you'll see them. They're those little flying fish, so they'll leap out and they'll come land in the water like 10 feet away. It's kind of cool. They don't literally fly; they just jump really far.
Yeah, they call them flying fish because they go up to really high speeds underwater, then they jump up and they glide.
Cool, very cool. So we were able to isolate this issue down to the motor, and now it's just a matter of actually doing the repair. I'm going to take it apart and see if I can repair it. If I can't, I'll go ahead and order a new one. You know, these things are fairly expensive, so if I can buy the parts and just fix the motor, I'll certainly try and do that. So I now have an additional project for this weekend. The other thing I'm going to do starting next week is I'm going to sand down the butterfly hatches. Just with as much travel as I've been doing lately, I'm getting a little bit dejected with not seeing some progress on the boat. So want to really start doing a little bit more boat projects on the weekend and really trying to focus on that. We've been, like I said, traveling for work. We took a vacation last week with the grandkiddos, and all those things were great fun, but I feel like we just haven't made any good progress in a while on the boat. Anyway, go with the Sailing Vessel Dream Chaser. Signing off. Y'all have a good one.